Washington is just exploding with news related to the entire Trump-Russia collusion hoax and all the things attached to it. But in particular, the decision by the Department of Justice to drop charges against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Because documents were released last week that were part of the secret depositions taken by the House Judiciary Committee, and that they were finally released, not really because they wanted to release them, but because actually the Intelligence Committee, they were forced to release them because the acting DNI Director Grinnell said to Adam Schiff, if you don't release these, I will. So documents now out there spreading around a very, very different story about how much evidence the Democrats in the House had, how much evidence the FBI and DOJ had, that justified going after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and more awareness for the first time that the president, the then President of the United States, Barack Obama, was very much in the know, at the very least, very much in the know of the decisions inside the FBI to try to go after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and in fact concerns about whether he is actually to be viewed as one of the people involved in cooking up this plot. To start with, I have a clip by the attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. The attorney for Flynn is Sidney Pod been on the show before, and she spoke in a press conference. So I have a clip I sent to the very wonderful Matt, giving him so he can play for you this little clip by Sidney Powell and her comments about Obama's knowledge and involvement.
And set up within the FBI, Clapper, Brennan, and in the Oval Office meeting that day with President Obama.
So you think this goes all the way up to the top to President Obama?
Absolutely.
Okay, there you have it. She's actually saying she, who is Sidney Powell, the attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, really clear. Sidney Powell is not someone who makes accusations or statements cavalierly. She's a very, if you read her books, very thorough in her preparation, very earnest, very clear, never overstates her case. And she's saying this goes all the way to Obama. This whole knowledge of cooking up the reason, the prosecution of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn for, as we now know, a basic lie, cooked up a lie to get him. I want to also have you play, because this is becoming just extremely a great concern to the Democrats, to the American left. President Obama had a conference call with Democrat kind of supporters, Democrat donor types, and supposedly a little bit of this call was leaked to the press. But actually, it seems very obvious he's wanted this released, this statement by Obama talking about how dangerous it is that the DOJ dropped charges against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Here's a clip of what Obama had to say.
The degree to which the news over the last 24 hours, I think, has been somewhat downplayed about the Justice Department dropping charges against Michael Flynn, and the fact that there is no precedent that anybody can find for someone who's been charged with perjury just getting off scot-free. That's the kind of stuff where you begin to get worried that basic, not just institutional norms, but our basic understanding of rule of law is at risk. And when you start moving in those directions, it can accelerate pretty quickly, as we've seen in other places. So I am hoping that all of you feel the same sense of urgency that I do. Whenever I've campaigned, I've always said, this is the most important election, especially, obviously, when I was on the ballot. That always feels like it's the most important election. This one, I'm not on the ballot, but I am pretty darn invested. We got to make this happen.
Friends, I want to make clear how serious this is. I'm going to wrap up the first 5 because I just want to tease this subject today, and then we'll turn in the next segment to much more detail about this. But the American left is rattled. The American left is deeply, deeply rattled. They cannot figure out what to do. Let me make clear. They had no idea that everything they were cooking up would ever be uncovered. The Obama team, all of his pals inside the FBI and DOJ, they all thought that everything they were ever doing, everything they were plotting, every communication they had would never make it anywhere, that you would simply have no reason it would ever get out. So they continued what they were doing, and even after, to make really clear with this, there's a conversation we'll be talking about in a moment. This relates to when President Trump had won the election. He's going to take office January 20th, but we're still early January of 2017. Obama's still president. He's inside the Oval Office, and I'll tease by ending this first 5 by saying this. What became very obvious to everyone over the weekend is that Obama was up to his knees, or maybe even was up to his eyeballs, in at least knowledge, if not complicity, in all that the FBI was doing in trying to target and frame Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. This is what the left is concerned about. It's what Sidney Powell is talking about. It is what President Obama is now deeply alarmed about. He's trying to get the message out to his base. Look, he's claiming that it was unprecedented for the DOJ to drop charges once someone pled guilty to perjury, which is patently absurd. It's just, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. But worse than that, or more than that, it is President Obama trying to convey, this is panic time, folks. We are going to be uncovered here. We've got huge problems coming down the pike this year in 2020 prior to the elections. And you, my base, this is Obama speaking to his base, you, my base, you got to be on top of this. You got to be defending me because big bad things are coming down the line. This is a major rattling of forces inside the Democrat Party at the highest levels. And I'll talk more in the next segment about this, but this is a really important time to understand the last point I'll make in this first 5. We do not in our country take lightly the idea of prosecuting anyone. Well, the DOJ took very lightly the idea of prosecuting Lieutenant General Michael Flynn for doing nothing wrong. But we do not in our country do the kind of things that are normally attributed to third world, banana republic, or deeply repressive totalitarian countries where once you have a new leader come in, you have the prosecutors dive in and try to find a basis to arrest and convict the previous head of the country. We don't do that in this country. We don't have a new election happen and then turn and try to prosecute and jail the previous president. This is obviously not something that we would ever do, even in the case of maybe some mild wrongdoing being uncovered. But you have people in this country, you have conservatives in this country saying, hey, look, maybe Obama knew more than we thought. Maybe he was more involved than we thought. But you can't get in there and say, we're going to actually consider investigating and possibly prosecuting a former president. You have conservatives saying this, saying, we just don't want to do this. It's too unseemly. But I have to tell you, folks, depending on what the investigation uncovers, depending on what we figure out, what Obama knew and when he knew it, depending on what we find out, if we want to ever say we have a rule of law in this country again, that the rule of law, that blind justice actually still applies in this country, we cannot say, except of course for former presidents, or except of course for a former president who happens to be America's first black president, because then you may have a lot of racial tension created. We cannot abandon the rule of law in the case such as this, in which what was really happening inside the FBI and DOJ is actually considered by many people actual treason. It was the effort to overthrow the duly elected president of this country. That's what they were doing. That's why they went after Flynn. So the idea that we're going to say, well, everybody else might be possibly prosecuted. We have Brennan and all sorts of people you can run through the laundry list. But we can't touch Obama because he's a former president. We don't do that, or because we may have too much social unrest or racial unrest. We cannot agree to that. We cannot agree to setting any precedent that a president can be involved with the FBI and the DOJ and the CIA and aware that they are trying to use those offices, those national law enforcement agencies, to take down a duly elected president, we cannot say that we're going to let that go in the interest of decorum, in the interest of, well, we don't want to be seen as petty. If President Obama was as complicit as it appears may be possible, there is no way we can decide he's above the law. He cannot be prosecuted. Every single person involved in this unbelievable mess that is now finally apparently coming to the surface must be assessed, reviewed. If crimes are committed, they need to make a presentation to a grand jury, get an indictment, and move forward. You cannot say the rule of law is not going to apply to certain people for any reasons, or else you have no rule of law at all. And that, my friends, is today's First Five.